The planet Sarin 7 was known across the galaxy as a place of lawlessness and danger. It was a world of dust and sand where survival depended on your strength and wit. The marketplace was chaotic and loud, filled with traders selling everything from exotic animals to weapons, and travelers haggling for rare minerals. But among all the noise and commotion, there was one attraction that stood out above all: the giant widow. Shira was her name. A massive woman unlike anything anyone had ever seen. She was an alien from a far-off world, tall and muscular, with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 battles. Her skin was a deep shade of blue, marked with scars from countless fights, and her long dark hair fell in thick waves over her broad shoulders. Yet despite her terrifying appearance, there was something about her that made people stay away, not just because of her strength, but because of the sadness in her eyes. She had been captured years ago, after a war that had destroyed her home. Zira had fought for survival, alone in a galaxy that had turned its back on her kind. She was feared by many, called a monster by some and a weapon by others. Now she sat in a cage in the heart of the marketplace, a prisoner to those who had decided that she was too dangerous to be free. The crowd gathered around the cage, whispering in fear and curiosity. They stared at Zira, but none dared to approach. Her reputation had grown, and people spoke of her in hushed tones. She was a force of nature, unstoppable, deadly, and they believed filled with rage. But no one really knew the truth about her. Zira wasn't a mindless killer. She wasn't a creature of pure violence. She was a woman trapped by her past, by her need to survive, and by the expectations others had placed upon her. She had lost everything: the home she once knew, the family she loved, and the hope she had for a peaceful life. That's when Jace McAllister walked into the marketplace. Jace was a cowboy, though not from Earth. He had been born on a colony on the edge of the galaxy, a place where the land was tough and the people even tougher. He had fought in battles, traded goods, and lived a life on the move. His face was weathered by the harsh sun, his clothes worn but practical. He had been to many places, met many people, and seen many things, but nothing like the giant widow. Jace had heard stories about Zira. He had heard the rumors, the tales of her strength and her fury. But he wasn't afraid of her. Something about the way she sat there in the cage, her eyes empty and distant, pulled at him. He didn't see a monster. He saw a woman who had been broken by a galaxy that didn't care for her. And that, more than anything, made him want to know her story. He pushed his way through the crowd, his boots tapping lightly on the dusty ground. The traders and spectators parted for him, some giving him wary glances. It wasn't every day that someone with the calm confidence of Jace McAllister walked through the marketplace. He had a reputation of his own, not for strength, but for getting things done, no matter the odds. When he reached the cage, he paused for a moment. Zira didn't look at him. She was staring out into the distance as though the world had passed her by. She didn't seem to notice the crowd around her, nor did she care. Jace cleared his throat, and the sound echoed in the silence. Zira's head turned slowly, her eyes locking with his. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched out thick and heavy. "You're not like the others," Zira said, her voice low and rough. It was the first time in weeks that someone had spoken to her, not out of fear, but with something else. Curiosity. "No, I'm not," Jace replied. "I've heard stories about you." Zira raised an eyebrow, her gaze narrowing. "All bad, I bet." "Not all," Jace said with a slight smile. "Some say you're a monster. Some say you're a hero. I think you're something else entirely." Zira chuckled bitterly, the sound rough and hollow. "You don't know anything about me." "I don't, but I want to." There was a long pause. Zira studied him, her gaze sharp. There was something in his eyes that made her hesitate. For a moment, she thought he might be another one of those people who wanted to use her, control her, or destroy her. But there was no malice in his look, only an odd kind of compassion. Jace took a step closer to the cage. He wasn't intimidated by her size or the stories that followed her. In fact, he felt an odd connection to her, something he couldn't quite explain. "I'm not here to judge you, Zira. I just want to help." Zira's face softened ever so slightly. "Help? There's no helping me." "You're wrong," Jace said quietly. "There's always a way out." Zira looked at him for a long time, then glanced down at the ground. Her hands, huge and calloused, clenched into fists, and for a moment, Jace thought she might lash out. But she didn't. Instead, she spoke again, her voice filled with a sadness that made Jace's heart ache. I've been trapped for so long, Jace. I don't know if I can ever be free. My people are gone. My family. My friends. They're all gone. What's left of me is nothing but a killer. That's not true, Jace said firmly. You're more than that. Zira looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for some sign that he meant what he said. Why do you care? Jace didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a deep breath and looked around. The marketplace was still filled with people, but no one was looking at him or Zira. They had all gone back to their own business, as though the two of them were nothing more than a passing curiosity. I'm tired of the violence, tired of people being forced into cages, Jace said quietly. You're not a weapon, Zira, you're a person, and I think you deserve a chance at a better life. Not as a prisoner, not as a monster, just as you. Zira stared at him speechless for a moment. She had never heard anyone speak to her like that. Most people feared her or used her for their own gain. No one had ever looked at her and seen her as a person, not in years. Jace pulled something from his belt, a small pouch of credits. He held it out to the trader standing nearby, a large, gruff man who had been watching the exchange with growing interest. How much for her freedom? The trader raised an eyebrow. You want to buy her? I do, Jace said without hesitation. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Jace handed over a generous sum of credits. The trader took the money with a greedy grin, unlocking the cage. For the first time in years, Zira stood up and stepped out of the cage. She was free. Jace smiled at her, a warmth in his eyes that made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Are you sure about this? Zira asked, her voice still filled with uncertainty. Jace simply nodded. I'm sure. Now how about that drink? Zira hesitated, then slowly nodded. It was the first time she'd said yes to something in so long. For the first time in years, she felt a small spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time, a glimmer of possibility. As they walked off together, the crowd remained silent, watching them go. No one had expected this. No one had expected the giant widow to be freed, not like this. But maybe, just maybe, there was hope for her yet. The days that followed Zira's release were a blur. She had never known what it felt like to be free, to walk without fear of being captured or forced into battle. But now, with Jace by her side, everything seemed different. The world didn't feel as heavy as it once did, and for the first time in years, Zira began to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a future waiting for her that didn't involve war and pain. Jace had become her guide, not just through the galaxy but through life itself. He taught her about kindness, patience, and trust. For someone who had lived her whole life in fear and anger, these things were difficult to understand, but Jace never gave up. He patiently showed her that not everything had to be a fight, that sometimes the best way to win was to simply walk away from the chaos. Their journey across the galaxy was filled with challenges. The universe was vast and unpredictable. Some places were peaceful, others hostile. But with every step they took, Zira felt herself changing. The warrior inside her was still there, but she was learning to control it. She was learning to be more than just a weapon. Their travels took them to many planets. Some were nothing more than dust and ruins, remnants of long-forgotten civilizations. Others were thriving cities, filled with people from all walks of life. Everywhere they went, Jace helped her see the world in a different light. He had a way of looking at the universe that made it seem less frightening. He spoke of hope, of new beginnings, and of love. One day, as they walked through a bustling market on a planet called Solara, Zira began to feel the weight of her past creeping back. She saw people staring at her with wide eyes, whispering to each other. It was the same look she had received on Sarin 7. Fear, distrust. She wanted to hide, to run away, but Jace stopped her. You're not alone, Zira, he said, his voice calm and reassuring. People may not understand you, but that doesn't mean you're not worthy of respect. Let them stare if they want. You're free now. For the first time in her life, Zira didn't feel like a prisoner. She didn't feel like a monster. She felt human, and that feeling was both freeing and terrifying. As they continued their journey, Zira's doubts began to fade. She started to believe in Jace, in their future together. She realized that maybe she didn't need to be alone anymore. Maybe there was a place for her in this vast galaxy, a place where she could belong, and maybe that place was with Jace. But just as things were beginning to feel normal, danger arrived. It came in the form of a group of bounty hunters, rough, cold-hearted mercenaries who had been hired by a powerful warlord from Zira's past. They had tracked her for months, and now they were closing in. Jace and Zira had been staying on a small colony, a peaceful world where they had hoped to lay low for a while. But that peace was shattered when the bounty hunters arrived. They attacked without warning, destroying buildings and threatening the innocent people of the colony. Shira's heart raced. She had fought many battles in her life, but this time it was different. She wasn't fighting to survive. She was fighting to protect the people she had come to care for. And she wasn't alone. Jace was by her side. "We're not running this time," Jace said, his voice steady. "We're standing and fighting." Zira nodded, feeling a surge of determination she hadn't felt in years. The warriors who had captured her, the people who had used her as a weapon, they would not take this from her. She was not just a tool of war anymore. She was her own person, and she had something worth fighting for. The battle was fierce. The bounty hunters were skilled, and they knew how to fight dirty. But Jace and Zira were a team, and together they were unstoppable. Jace used his quick thinking and skill with a blaster, while Zira's strength and combat training made her a force to be reckoned with. The bounty hunters were no match for them. When the fight was over, the bounty hunters were either captured or driven away. The colony was safe, and for the first time, Zira felt something she had never felt before: peace. The battle had been won, but more importantly, she had fought for something she cared about. As they walked back to the colony's center, Jace placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did good, Zira. You didn't just fight to win. You fought for the right reasons." Zira looked at him, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Maybe I'm not so broken after all." Jace grinned. "I never thought you were broken. Just a little lost." Zira's heart fluttered. She had never thought of herself as someone who could be loved. She had always been the warrior, the outcast, the one who had to fight to survive. But now, with Jace beside her, she felt something new: hope. A hope that maybe, just maybe, she could build a life beyond the violence. A life with him. That night, as the stars shone brightly above them, Jace turned to her. They were sitting by a fire, the crackling of the flames the only sound in the quiet night. "Zira," he began, his voice soft, "I've been thinking." Zira looked at him, her brow furrowing slightly. "About what?" "About us," Jace said, taking a deep breath. "About everything we've been through. I've never met anyone like you before. You're strong, brave, and more than anyone could ever understand. I've seen the worst parts of you, and I've seen the best. And no matter what, I want you by my side." Zira's heart skipped a beat. She knew what he was about to say, and part of her had been waiting for it. She had tried to keep her feelings hidden, not wanting to get hurt again, but now she couldn't deny it any longer. "I want to be with you, Jace," she whispered. "More than anything." Jace smiled, a warmth in his eyes that melted the last of her doubts. "Then will you marry me?" The words hung in the air, and for a moment time seemed to stop. Zira stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never imagined a future like this, peaceful, full of love, and free from the violence that had ruled her life for so long. "Yes," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, I will." Jace's face lit up, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Zira felt truly alive. She was no longer the giant widow in the cage. She was Zira, a woman with a future, and that future was with Jace.